Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Holding It Together Kinda podcast. I'm Michael Macniak, as usual, and joining me this week is a dynamic woman that I met in Las Vegas by the name of Karmen Jenkins. And Karmen, to start off every show, I like to ask my guests, what are you working on now? What's got you really jazzed up, fired up, and juiced up going on in your life or with your business or whatever right now?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
It could be. It very well could be.
What's going on right now? Everything.
Good.
But what I'm working on right now is I was able to self-publish a workbook in January. So now I'm working on a journal that women can utilize to help them dig deeper into themselves and expand their perspectives introspectively, looking inside and then moving out forward. And then we'll see what comes after that. Doing some podcasts, speaking here and there, doing some presentations, that life we live.
And here you are. And I appreciate you taking the time to join me for this one.
No
But so
worries.
talk about for a second what you do with with your business with Abundant Life and what that's all about. It's interesting to me. And I'm sure
Yeah.
other people will
So,
find it
so
interesting
my
too.
business is Inner Healing for Abundant Living. And I am a retired licensed clinical social worker. I worked for the federal government for a number of years. I worked for them in conjunction with being in the military. So I joined the military in 1978, right out of high school,
Hmm.
and then spent 9.5 years on active duty in the medical field, and then consequently in the reserves after obtaining my social work degree and then my master's degree. So I was dual-hatted, as they say. I was in the uniform sometimes as a part-time soldier in the reserves after coming off active duty, and then working for the government as a civil servant. And so when I retired from the reserves, that was in 2006, I still worked for the federal government as a social worker. And then I retired from doing social work clinically in 2017. And then I opened my business in 2017. So I'm a certified life coach and I provide life coaching services for women 30 years of age and over, military women, veterans, and mothers with daughters. And people often ask me, well, how did you decide on those three areas? Because each one of those areas is the woman that I am. I'm a woman over 30. I am a military veteran, and I am a mother with a daughter. And
And
so
you also
those,
happen to be the daughter of a mother.
absolutely. So those are the three areas that I have a immediate affinity for, and get a pleasure and enjoyment to work with other women that are in those same areas.
Good for you. That's great. I mean, like you say, it's good when you enjoy what you do and whenever you talk about what you do with you kind of light up and it's good to see. It's nice to see somebody enjoying what they're doing. So good for you.
Thank you. Thank
But
you.
one of the things that we got talking about in Vegas at that conference was uh, obviously the perspective that I'm trying to reach out to, and that is caregiving. And my initial focus for most of my career has been around severe and persistent mental illness and people who are struggling to maintain meaningful life in the community for adults. And lately, especially during COVID, I had a lot of everybody, I think all of us had a lot of introspection and a lot of life uh, searching. And it really started to hit me about how much impact chronic long-term and or mental illnesses have on the family and what the families have to go through, including other kids that are living in the home, but the moms and dads and the split on their relationships and stuff like that. And I'm really interested in hearing caregiving stories and hacks and tricks of the trade, if you will, about that. And you coming at it from such a wealth of experience through your military training, your clinical background, and now your independent life coaching and things like that. Tell us about your experience as a caregiver, as a caregiving daughter.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it definitely fits in neatly with what I see behind you, holding it together,
Thank you.
kinda.
Kinda, right? Because we all kinda are.
We kind of are, we kind of try, and we kind of wish we could. There's
Hmm.
probably various statements that we can make related to that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that I consciously planned on. I knew that at some point it probably would come, um, because I am the only child that my mother birthed. And so that, just kind of spoke to at some point in time, I would have some say so and input on her end of life planning, as much as she would allow me to have. And
Yeah.
fortunately, she allowed me to have a lot of say so. So I also grew up watching other caregivers in my family, and that kind of gave me a sense of what the responsibility would look like. And as a military person, as a social worker, I spent a lot of time in hospitals. And so I saw a lot of families caring for their loved one, in the way that they knew how, with supports that the hospital programs and services provided. So I had some background knowledge and understanding, but it's nothing like having that firsthand experience. And when I actually had to begin that process, it was sort of gradual. My mother was pretty high functioning. She worked and had a career and so forth. But as her health started to decline, she needed supports. And the first challenge came because we had geographical distance. She was in Ohio and I was in Maryland. And so a lot of things we did back that time there wasn't virtual. So a lot of things we did telephonically. I had a lot of conversations with her providers, her doctors, and then we began processes of me taking on responsibility on paper for her bank accounts and being able to schedule appointments for her and things of that sort. And so that went on for a couple of years until it got to the point where she wasn't able to navigate those things even with my assistance, and she needed some physical supports. So my spouse and I moved her from Ohio. She was living in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I'm from,
Right.
to Maryland, where we're living. And the plan was for her to stay with us until end of life. But unexpectedly, her end of life came quite sooner than we anticipated. She was with us only for about 2 years.
Okay.
And
Well,
we're
that's
probably
2 years is still quite a long time
it's
when
a
you're in
long
those
time, but it's
trenches.
it's a short time when you're planning on a longer duration of life.
Sure, sure,
We
sure,
had
sure.
2 children at the time, and they were young, so it definitely had its impact on our family unit, and took a toll on each one of us in different ways. Our
Sure.
children were at that time middle school and high school, and so it definitely put a strain on the family.
And that's something that is honest, and it's forthright, and I think that a lot of people feel that way, and they feel a lot of guilt that they feel that way, that they are acknowledging that this is straining on me and my family, and I shouldn't feel this way. I should just suck it up because for me to feel the strain is bad. Does that make sense? In other words,
A lot
there's
of
a guilt, resentment, anything like that that families who are in the caregiving positions often feel, and it's very, very normal. It's very natural. We're human beings, you know?
Yeah, for myself, as I tend to do in those younger stages of my life, just kind of power through difficult times. And so some of that I learned from the military as well. You suck it up and you drive on, as we
Yeah.
like to say. So that the emotional aspect of things for me really didn't come until after my mother passed.
Mm,
But the emotional experiences were very tangible for our children. We have a son and a daughter,
right.
and their different personalities and ways of dealing with grief and loss were different. And so their expressions of the disruptions were very poignant,
Mm,
very, very visible and very sometimes visceral.
Really,
after
really.
her
Well, I
died.
mean, it's so we bring up a bunch of points. Number one, you were talking about initially, you were transient. You were in Maryland, your mom was in Cleveland, and that is a big reality of society today. We are a transient society. We are not in one place.
Right.
Things like this call, right? Talking over Zoom make things somewhat easier,
Yeah.
but that is a big part of some of the things that we need to overcome. And as I said earlier, I've always been interested in the other kids that are in the house. So if you're a mom and dad raising a kid that has mental illness or specialized needs, what is the impact on the other children in the home? Because most, if not 90% of your attention is going to the child who has a special needs. And here you're bringing up a really interesting point about seeing, especially with your background, seeing how your mother's failing health, et cetera, in your home had an impact, not so much on you because of your military training and plowing your way through it, but describe some of what you saw so other people might recognize some of the things you saw in your kids. And you don't have to specify exactly, but or
No, no,
who,
it's
you
fine. I
know,
think it's going to be educational for people.
yeah, for sure.
So it did have a toll on me as well, but I would say that the biggest impact came after her passing. What initially began to take place is, our son at the time, he was young, and so he really didn't handle anticipatory death very well. And so he really kind of wanted nothing to do with the caretaking of his grandmother. There would be times where I would say, take her plate upstairs or, go get her a glass of water. And he would kind of, as teenagers do, shrug and huff and puff, kind of like,
Oh,
what do I
I
have
got
to
to do everything
kind of
around
thing.
here.
And kind of, just be very disgruntled,
Yeah.
um, to the point where sometimes he just wouldn't do it.
Right, right, right.
His sister, on the other hand, they're about 5 years apart, so she was a little apprehensive, but she would still be of somewhat of assistance. But I was trying to be very mindful of not making them feel like it was their responsibility in any way. Um, and so hopefully that helped somewhat. So the brunt of the load, so to speak, fell on myself and my husband, and we both worked as well. So we were not home full time. And so for an initial period of time, my mother was okay being at home alone, as long as we kind of prepared some things for her and she could have easy access to things. We would help her do some things before we left home and then when we got back home. But then it got to the point where she wasn't able to be home alone very long. And so we
Mhm.
had to get caregiving services. So that was another layer and another aspect. And with her insurance, she had state insurance, so she didn't have a lot of additional financial resources. So we had to go through the state systems and apply for those resources and services. And fortunately, in the area where we're living, they were pretty good. So we were able to get some adult care through the Center of Aging and the Department of Social Services for um, older adults, geriatric adults, and we were able to get some in-home care a couple of times a week.
No, that's good.
That
That's
offset
that
what we
helps.
had to do.
Mm,
And then it got to a point where that wasn't enough because she needed more services than what the systems could provide. And so fortunately, there were a few persons from my church that were willing to help. And they would come and prepare meals for her and sit with her for a little while and things of that nature. But then when it got to the point where her health declined further, then we had to begin to look at other types of services where they were going to require inpatient care. And then we did that for a while with the hope that she would be able to come back home. But her health didn't sustain. She came home for a brief period of time, but then we had to place her in nursing home care.
right.
Uh,
When you were going through, first of all, let's get back a second to the conversation with your children because this came up in a conversation that I had with another woman. In fact, I've spoken to her several times, and it came up again last night, as a matter of fact. And I think you bring up an important point where you had a conversation with your kids and said to them, "I'm the daughter. This is my mom. I feel a personal obligation, whatever you want to call it, however you want to label it, but I need to take care of my mom. I want you children to know that I want you to have a life. I want you to be kids. This is not your responsibility. To the extent you want to be part of it, thank you. I appreciate it. To the extent that you can't or won't or don't want to, I have to accept that and understand that as well. Is that more or less summing it up?
We didn't have the direct conversation.
No, I know, but
I think
I'm
that
trying to summarize.
intuitive thing that they knew. Um, but what was communicated to them was that they still were going to continue to do the things that they were accustomed to doing.
Good. Good.
And there, if there came a time where we could no longer be in two places at one time, so to speak, sometimes three places,
Yeah.
and then we would have to look at, outside supports. So again, fortunately, we had enough wraparound services with friends because family was distant. They were in Ohio, they were in Cleveland,
Yeah.
immediate family. But we had developed a secondary family in the area where we live. And so there were people that we could reach out to. So that helped.
And you're very lucky in that regard. How did you find it? And again, your background may have helped you with this, but a lot of people are up against that run into that entitlement and resource wall and just don't even know where to start. I mean, it is daunting. It is, what's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare? What about private insurance? What's tertiary insurance? On and on and on we go. How did you personally know about how to deal with that and navigate those systems, or did you get help, or did you have a background through the military, et cetera?
I had some background from working in the hospital systems, both private and government, but a lot of it was just research. I knew from the services that my mother was receiving prior to her relocating what she was going to need, but I had to do my own research about what the local services were in the city where we're living. I knew enough that there were services available. I didn't always know what agency would provide those services. So I started with what I thought made the most sense, and that was the Department of Social Services. And then they guided me further as to where to go from there. There were some services,
Local, you're saying you had a local social services agency or
yes,
state?
every city has a local Department of Social
Yeah.
Services. So yes.
Good. That's good to know because, I know our Connecticut, small state as well. Not all of our cities have a social worker I mean, some of the wealthier towns do. But I think that you're right. I think that the Department of Social Services is a really good place for people to start, and they have a lot of hotlines, the 211 hotline, where you can call in and I don't know if 211 is the right number, but you can call up and say, here's what I'm facing, and there are resources that they can help you with. You mentioned the area agencies on aging, and other elderly protective services. Those are all really good pieces of advice for you to give that you're giving people to help them to help their loved one. And that's what this is really all about.
Yeah, I just have to start, with the basics. You start with, if you're not really sure, the agency that helps children, even they would be able to make a referral and tell you where to call. So every city, even if it's a small rural area, has some office that's responsible for the welfare of children.
Yes.
So even if you called there, they could tell you where the adult office is located. And then it just kind of mushrooms out from there. There's always sometimes the possibility that they're going to recommend services that one would have to pay for. And you would just have to verbalize, no, I don't have the resources financially for that. And then they will let you know what would be available through the city and state. That requires the person being registered in that area, having some type of identification card, whether it's a driver's license or a state ID card, something that they can prove that they're a resident. Sometimes they want them to have a bill in their name, which sometimes is a little challenging.
Yeah, it can be. You're
But
right. I
they'll,
mean,
yeah, but they'll let you know what their requirements are. And generally, sometimes the challenges can be now because this was years ago. My mother passed away in 2011. So things have drastically changed even since then.
Sure, sure they have.
There's always some red tape, there's always some requirements, there's always paperwork upon paperwork upon paperwork upon paperwork.
I mean, you talk about having to push through and gut it out, right? I mean,
So that can be
that's an
understable
understatement. Yeah, oh
within
yeah,
itself,
yeah. But
particularly when you can't
to your
locate
next
documents and
point,
other things.
was you had this community of second family, of friends that were surrounding you and were willing to help out, which I'll tell you, you're very lucky, and I'm sure you know that, um, because so often we talk about this on this podcast a lot. You know, people are out there and they're willing to help. I think it's human nature. I'm the guy that thinks that people are genuinely nice and want to help other people. Um, but a lot of us, I think, are afraid to ask for the help that we need. So I'm curious about how that looked. And you said that you were part of a church community, which is always a great resource for people to find, willing, charitable. I mean, it's the nature of church-going people is they want to be charitable and give of themselves abundantly, as you like to say. Um, so how did that look? Did you reach out? Did you ask? Did they offer? Was it volunteer?
All of those things.
Okay, great,
Those things.
great.
They were very much aware that my mother was coming to live with me. They were, as long as she was able, she would attend church with me. So they got to meet her, got to know her a little bit. And I knew those that would be able to be of assistance. And then I asked, and they agreed, and they volunteered. So it was, you know, no financial exchange involved. But
Hmm.
there were in-kind services. They would, would come here, help her with things, and then I would help them with things that I could help out with.
Yeah,
So kind of like a barter system.
right.
So that was, kind of how we established the agreement or the
Got
contract. I'll do
it.
some things
Yeah.
for you, you do some things for me.
Yeah. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Yeah, yeah, for
Did
sure.
you find, because this came up in a conversation I had with Joanne Schaefer, you might have met her in Vegas too. She wrote that book on grief. Anyway, she said that one of the most important things to do is to be specific about the help that you need or specific about the help that you want to give, as opposed to being just, yeah, I could really use some help, leave it at that. It's, yes, I could really use some help if somebody can come and sit with my mother for a half an hour so I can take a shower. I don't know, you name it.
Mhm.
Did you
Yeah,
find that to be true?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you need to sort of, assess who has the skills to provide the service. And so there were very specific things that we did that someone else was going to need to duplicate. Cook her a meal every now and then. They may have had to help her bathe. They may have had to, give her medicine. So they had to be able to follow through with those things. And so the people that I asked, I knew were people that could do those things.
How did the conversation go with your spouse and family to the extent that there was one about, hey, it's time that we have to move grandma into the house here because she's failing and we need to be there to help her?
That was kind of it.
That was it. That was the conversation.
Yeah, it was kind of it. I had, gotten to the point where I was traveling from Maryland to Ohio, which is about a 5.5 hour drive one way.
Yeah, it is.
And I
Yep.
would do that once a month for a while. I did that for many months. And then sometimes when she would have medical appointments, I would take off work and I would go back to be there for her appointments or to help her refile for her Medicare and things of that nature. So when it got to the point where those things needed to be transferred here, because I wasn't going to be able to keep traveling back and forth, and she wasn't physically going to be able to go to those offices alone, or even with me, then it was the decision made to move here. And some of it had to do with where she was living, and her not being able to manage her bills and things of that nature. So we did the distance support as long as we could. And then it got to the
Right.
point where she had to physically come with us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it, obviously no two stories are the same. And you could have, under some circumstances, they could do the distance thing for a long period of time, and sometimes it's, oh, nope, this is we're at the turning point here. Talk about, especially given your career and your specialty, um, you must have been able to do a lot of introspection about what it meant to you in a positive way, to develop that relationship with your mom at the end of her life, and for you in growth personally, like flexing muscles that you never even knew you had. Have you given that any thought or considered any of that?
Not so much about the flex and muscle piece.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's just who I am in general.
right.
Um, but the conversations with her about our relationship were pretty much ongoing anyway. The older I got, the closer we became. Uh, and so as we were in physical proximity of one another again, we had spent many, many years apart, uh, over 30 something years, because I was in the military and then I lived in a different state.
Hmm.
But when she came to live with us, it was more of an adjustment for her than it was for us because she gave up everything that was hers pretty much. She was able to bring some of her furniture and some of her clothing and some of her, personable items, but she sacrificed and gave up a lot. She was moving into someone else's home. And so the freedom that she had and the decision making and all those things um, began to fall on me. So there was a reversal of roles,
Right.
and the challenges were definitely in that. I was still the daughter, but still had to be her spokesperson and had to be the decision maker in a lot of ways. Didn't always go well.
All right. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking in my head, right? So you went from, we have that delicate balance in our relationship with our parents sometimes, and we have these boundary things, these unspoken boundaries. And here you went from the protected to the protector. And so that in and of itself has to be tough. And one of the things that you just brought to mind is, you hear about how hard it is for people to give up their license, or for kids to say to their parents, it's done. We can't have you driving anymore, because it's that loss of that autonomy. So it sounds like your mom was pretty lucid right till the very end there, when she knew that, participated in these discussions and was these decisions. So you're lucky in that regard.
Yeah, well, she was diagnosed with dementia,
Oh, she was
but she
okay.
wasn't completely lucid till the end, and she had a lung condition. And so the two primary declining areas of her health were her mental capacity and her breathing capacity.
Hmm.
And so it was definitely straining in the regard of there would be times where she would want to do things and make decisions, but they weren't rational and they weren't sound and they weren't safe.
That's
And
hard.
so she would want to, argue about who's in control, so to speak. And there were times where I'm sure she felt childlike, as if I was treating her like a child. And there may have been times where I probably did because of safety reasons. There was one time where my mother got lost. Um, we had gotten up that morning, prepared to go to work, and this was before we realized that she couldn't be left home by herself. I left first, my spouse left next, and for whatever reason, I don't think he was going to be gone the whole time. He circled back and she wasn't here. And
What?
so he
Just like that
called.
quick?
Well, it wasn't like quick. It might have been
Oh,
an
okay.
hour or so,
All right. Okay.
because he didn't work that far away. He worked about 20 minutes from our home.
Yeah.
And it's been so long ago, I don't remember all the details. But he came back and she wasn't here. And so he called me at work, asking if I had spoken with her, when's the last time. And I, had that conversation. And so he went out to look for her. And this was in the winter. And so we had to call the police department to help us to look for her. And thanks be unto God, we were able to find her. But ultimately, my mother had been gone for about an hour.
Where did she go?
I'm not sure where she went. I wasn't here. By the time I got home, which was about an hour or so later, she was here. Um,
Wow.
the police had brought her back. And so she wasn't too far from the house. Um, and, to try to describe exactly where she was within our housing area. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. But she was wandering.
But my
She,
husband couldn't find her.
right.
And she still had her house clothes, her bed clothes on. So she
Really.
wasn't clothed and prepared to be outside. And that was sort of the turning point and decline in her health. Her mental capacity after that time really started to decline,
Mm,
and her physical health started to decline. So surely my husband felt guilty. He felt some grief about that. He felt like it was his
right.
fault and he was responsible for her getting out. Um, but it wasn't his fault. But he that's how he felt about it.
Well, I think that's a natural thing for any of us to feel.
Well, sure, of course.
I can't blame him for feeling that way, and I think it would be odd if he didn't feel that way. But at the same time, it's like we know you didn't like put her outside and like you do with your cat, right? We didn't put him outside and put her outside and close the door. It's just amazing to me where it came into her consciousness to go for a walk in her
I don't
bedclothes.
think it was in her consciousness.
No,
I
the
think she
dementia
was
was such.
disoriented. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She could have been thinking she was going to the bathroom, the closet, who knows?
And imagine how
That's one of the mysteries. We never always understand the mind of someone that has dementia.
no,
Um, and she wasn't able to tell us exactly where she thought she was going. Um,
no.
so but that caused some disruption in our marriage, as well as being her caregivers. That caused some challenges and friction in our relationship. So there were a lot of layers, and a
Sure.
lot of upheaval,
Well,
in our
and
family.
that's I think that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. You have this responsibility that you feel, and rightfully so. And yeah, I mean, it can really put a lot of pressure. I mean, pressure on marriage for sure. So I think that one of the things that I try to do in these conversations is to let people know that if you are feeling this way or you're having these experiences, you're not alone. You're not abnormal. This is part of the human condition. Um, there is finger pointing, there is guilt on both sides or all sides, I mean, including your kids here. We have to be sensitive to your mother not wanting to be treated like a child, but it's sometimes, unfortunately, she had to be treated like a child too, because she could get lost trying to find the bathroom. And that's a sad reality. And I'm just so happy that you had such a background that you probably could really compartmentalize it in the appropriate place and understand it on that level.
Yeah, it hopefully I did.
Yeah.
You'd
You're
have to
still
ask my
thinking about
family
it?
how well I compartmentalized things at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that some of my background definitely was an asset, but then it was also, I would say a deficit because sometimes when you know a lot,
Mm,
and you're not able to come through in the way that you want, then that can be pressure as well. Uh,
and guilt.
so we all had our stages of grief that we went through in different ways.
That was the next question I was going to ask you about is the stages of grief. And I mean, it sounds like you knew that your mom was at life's end, right? And you had already made end of life discussions and preparations. And yet here you were with her every day in your home. And how, I mean, what is that like to love that person who is not the person you knew? She's a different person cognitively at the very least.
Mhm.
And on some level mourning that loss that hasn't even really happened yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Again, I think in a way, the preparation for me was there. I had, had those conversations with my mother, being her only child, and so we had power of attorneys, and we had wills, and we had all those documents, prepared, even took her to the point of she wanted to pick out her own casket and make her own funeral arrangements. So we had done all of that. So she and I sort of knew some of the logistical things of what was going to take place, but not the timing of those things.
Hmm.
And so, it's one thing to be on the administrative end of things. I feel it's another thing to have to actually make those end of life decisions. And I had to actually do that as well. I had to have those conversations with the medical providers and with her about how much more could be done and what she wanted to have done. And when enough was enough. And so she communicated to me what she would be willing to receive and what she did not want to have happen. And when we got to that point, then I had to communicate that to the medical staff. And
Right.
all of that is more than anyone I really think can be prepared for.
You
So
could prepare in terms of having the legal documents all drafted, but when it comes time to saying those words to the doctor, it's got to be a tough thing altogether.
yeah, even with having the documents though, having conversations with other family members can
Mm,
be difficult. There are things that they will disagree on.
absolutely.
So you can have things on paper, but still there are challenges and I had experience with all of those. There were things that her sister thought were, good and necessary and things that she didn't. But I had to make the final decisions.
Right.
So I
That's
was the
tough.
one, it's all tough. It's all,
That's tough. Yeah.
um, but I all along the way wanted to give my mother the best possible care that she could receive. Um, and I'm sure there were some times that I did well and sometimes I didn't do well.
No, but you did, and I say this too. If you in your gut feel like you're making the right decision for your mom or for whoever you're caring for, and you've done the soul searching, you've had the conversations with your mom, and you are from your gut thinking that you're doing the right thing, then you're doing the right thing. I honestly believe that. And it's very difficult, as you just alluded to, when you have the relatives that are surrounding you and chiming in, chirping in one ear, this one and this one, this one in the other ear. It's that could be really difficult, especially when it's ultimately you, and then feeling like you're getting the stink eye from the relative that disagreed with you for whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, it's helpful if you can have at least one person that's in your corner. And
Oh
I know
gosh, I would hope so.
that
Yeah.
doesn't happen for people.
No, it doesn't.
So you have to make the best decision that you can at the time.
That
And it sometimes goes against a lot of different things, a lot of other perspectives and views, and even maybe morals and ethics. The hardest part was watching my mother actually pass away, and I was there when she did.
mm,
So, I think that again, you can watch movies, you can, be with other people, you can have conversations about it, but that in the moment experience is something that sometimes people can never really describe. Even the after effects of that. There's times I still think about it and question myself and second guess myself.
my
Um,
friend my
but
friend was very close with his grandmother, very, very close relationship. She basically raised him, and I remember he said that one of the hardest things he had to do was be there for her for the last few days while she was, and this was the word he used, and I never heard it, and I think it's a fantastic way to describe it. He said, I'm watching her act, she's actively dying,
Mhm.
which was just such a, I don't know why that terminology just really hit me. It's like,
That's what it is. Yeah.
yeah, I've never heard that one before, but it's really a powerful. I mean, it encapsulates everything, right? In the actively dying. It's
It
a
does. Because there's, I don't want to trigger anyone by saying specific things, but there's stages of dying. And when you're the one that's present for those, it has an impact on you. And it's something
yeah,
you never forget.
yeah. And in some ways it's beautiful, I assume. In some ways it's very, very, very sorrowful. Is that accurate?
And there's mixed emotions. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, one other thing that I wanted to touch on is the generational aspect of things. I mean, it sounds like your mom, my dad were probably about the same age. Um, my dad's 84 now. I don't
Yeah,
know
my
how.
mother would have been 86 this year. She
So,
was still living.
so that's kind of where I figured we were right in that same wheelhouse.
Uh-huh.
Um, and my dad and my mother, but she's too, I don't know. She can't be bothered, but she would if I sat her down and said, let's talk about this. But my father and his brother and that generation is willing to talk about this stuff. My grandmother, right, was in that generation was absolutely not. So I'm happy that that worm is turned a little bit and that people are willing, or at least we kids, older kids now, we kids are willing to have the conversation with our parents and engage in it. And they're willing to have that engagement and that trust with us because guess what? Carmen, you are the one that's going to be, the doctors are going to go to you first and say, what do you want to do? You're the daughter. So I think that that knowledge is real power, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I, came from a family where those were conversations they were willing to have, but there are other conversations they weren't.
Well,
So we
that's
talked a
true
lot
too.
about future and end of life planning and financial planning and various kinds of things.
Right.
So that wasn't a odd conversation to have,
Hmm.
uh, but it's still a tough one to have.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. No, none of this is easy stuff. But so how do people find you, Carmen? How do people find you and get involved with your program and what you're doing to help out so many women?
Yeah, so I help women, with relationships, with making sure that they're living the lives that they desire to live. We have a lot of things pulling at us. The easiest way to find me is through social media. I have a
Mhm.
website. It's www.ih, the number 4al.com, and that stands for Inner Healing for Abundant Living. The QR
Took me
code
a
is on the
took me a
screen.
long time to figure that one out.
Yeah,
IH4AL. And now yeah, now
al.com.
it's like, oh, how dumb.
Yep.
But yeah, and you have on the screen, you have a QR code so
Yeah, the
people
QR
watching.
code is a quick way for women to find me, and that's a free download that they can download for free. It's just going to ask them for an email address so that I can stay in touch with them. I reach out to women twice a month and provide them with ongoing information and supports. But the QR code will give them a strategic plan for abundant living. I believe in having women take a look at every area of their life. So there's about 8 categories that it will help them to assess and give them some planning steps to move forward. And in that, they may actually add in some things related to caregiving and some
I
things
was going to
related
ask you that.
to, yeah,
Yeah.
to their other aspects of their household, because family is one of the areas that they would assess. And then I'm on social medias, Carmen R. Jenkins. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on
You're
Facebook.
everywhere.
I'm on TikTok. I'm on
She's everywhere.
Instagram.
She's floating around conferences with Miss Personality. She's great.
Yeah,
She's
yeah. Well,
great
my
at it.
mother was a very bubbly woman, so it kind of runs in
Yeah,
my genes.
I see where you get it from for sure. Um, yeah, I'll tell you, I think you would be a lot of fun to work with as a counselor and as a coach.
We
So
have a good time. I mean,
I'll bet.
there's some digging in we do with some
Yeah,
call
well,
it
you
root
have
work. We're
to.
gonna dig up some roots,
Yeah.
make sure we have the right soil,
Yep,
but
yep.
we have a good time. We do.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I really thank you for coming on and joining me. And
Welcome.
and giving me and the listeners that perspective of somebody with your background. I think that's the important piece is, even with all your background, you still had to slog through it, right? You had to kind of hold it together for everybody and you did that. So
Yeah.
thank you for what you did for your mom. Thank you for your family and thank you for the work that you do for everybody else out there right now.
Yeah, we all need someone, and there are times where I help women walk through the same processes. Because it's, when you're in the midst of things, life looks a whole lot different. And sometimes we're able to hold it together publicly, but privately, then we fall apart, and that's okay. We need that time to release and to be recharged and refreshed. And
But to
sometimes women just
have
need,
a Carmen Jenkins to go talk to
yeah,
is
sometimes people just need someone
paramount.
that they can really express themselves with no judgment.
Right, right. Well, thanks again for being here, and we'll talk very soon.
Same for you. Thank you for being there and doing what you do.
Oh, it's a pleasure, but I really enjoy it.